Thanks for the introduction. Really good to have this meeting today. Really great crowd. Thanks for everybody for showing up. So with that, I'll dive right in. We hear these buzzwords often. That it seems like the newest one is climate smart agriculture. So what exactly is that? How was this brought on? Why are we here today discussing this? The Inflation Reduction Act, President Biden signed in 2022 of August, included a large investment in climate and clean energy. With that came about several program announcements to help, roll these out on the ground, so to speak, which include CSAF, Climate Smart Ag and Forestry, IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, EQIP, and CSP. A lot of acronyms going to be thrown around here. I'm going to try to make it as layman terms as possible, but just bear with the acronyms. So what are climate smart ag practices? Basically, think of them as, if any of you guys are familiar with EQIP or CSP, think of them as practices that are from EQIP and CSP that deliver quantifiable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and or increase carbon sequestration, right? So that's the whole goal here. These are a list and a subset list of practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration. For those of you who are not familiar, EQIP and CSP are NRCS's main financial programs. Okay, I just want to kind of delve into the differences between EQIP and CSP right now. EQIP is the NRCS's longstanding farm bill program. It provides funding assistance to producers based on resource concerns on their land. It's a much broader program in terms of available practices. There is a list of practices that are over 300 available to producers. You can think of EQIP as the first step in farm management. This is going to address the beginning stages of addressing resource concerns on your farm. So when we talk about resource concerns, we talk about soil, water, air, plant, and human, right? Those list of practices are available online. Contact your local USDA service center to talk about EQIP or CSP, any of these programs. CSP is going to take it a step further, okay? CSP is for the producers that are, for lack of better terms, higher level managers of their land. And they've done EQIP over the years. They have addressed a lot of the resource concerns, but they want to take it a step further. CSP rewards existing stewardship and land management that producers are doing. So it's going to give you a payment based on the resource concerns that you're meeting at time of contracting. Plus, it's going to help you achieve a higher level management with enhancements and bundles. You'll hear me talk about enhancements today. Enhancements are specific to CSP, okay? Again, they're a step further. They're going to look at the details behind, let's say, nutrient management, for example. It's going to look into precision nutrient management, not just, regular nutrient management. It's going to take it a step further. Climate smart ag and forestry practices can be categorized, right? So when they were thinking, when they developed this program, they thought of these categories that would best, reduce greenhouse gases and carbon sequestration. There's also a link provided in the chat, I believe, but if I click on this, it's going to bring me to a list of CSAF practices, and one can go through. Hold on one second. Can you guys see that?
Yes,
okay.
We can.
Okay. So this list of practices, you can go through and you can actually click on each enhancement or practice, and this will take you a step further and it'll describe the enhancement. And that way, you guys know what you're getting yourselves into, right? If a lot of these catch your eye, some of them are really intense, and they're not for everybody, for sure. This list is basically the list of all the CSAF approved practices and enhancements. A lot has to do with prescribed grazing. We get into a lot of cover cropping. I'm just going to go up here to cover crop. So again, on the left, you're going to see that's like the EQIP practice, 340 cover crop. To the right, you're going to see the CSP enhancement, which are the higher level stuff. So it's a really good thing to go through before you're deciding on, whether or not to sign up for this program. All right. Just some details that are specific to this IRA, EQIP, and CSP. You have to adopt one or more of the core practices. The core practices are what I just showed. So if you enter in a contract with NRCS, you have to have one of these core practices in the activity list. There are facilitating practices that can receive payment that are in relation to these core practices. For example, let's say we do prescribed grazing, right? A core practice for prescribed, or a facilitating practice for prescribed grazing would be pipeline, waters, stuff related to that, okay? So that's kind of the difference between regular CSP and regular EQIP. The IRA, CSP, and EQIP, you have to adopt one of these core practices. March 31st is our sign-up deadline for this practice as well, or these programs as well. Contact your local USDA service center and speak to someone at NRCS. They'd be glad to help you. So yeah, I kind of just went through this before, but let's take, for example, you guys come in and sign up. One of you guys comes in and signs up for EQIP IRA for prescribed grazing. Prescribed grazing is a CSAF recognized activity, so the producer is meeting the requirement to implement at least one activity or enhancement. The producer can implement facilitating practices to carry out prescribed grazing. These would include fence, watering facility, livestock pipeline. I'm going to go over a CSP contract example because a lot of you guys are not familiar with actually seeing one of our contracts. So a lot of this, you might be saying to yourselves, like, what is he even talking about, these contracts, and what do they look like? And so CSP is kind of the program that you're going to hear a lot about, in the NRCS world, right? It's a program that National is pushing heavy. So therefore, I thought it was appropriate to go through this example to clear any uncertainties about it. So going back to the management practices or management that I was talking about, a producer would get a payment for an existing payment land use for cropland, farmstead, pasture land, forestry. Okay, this relates to the amount of acres in that land management. So let's say this producer had 1,185 acres of cropland. He's going to get a $7.50 per acre payment across all those acres per year for 5 years. This is what sets CSP apart from EQIP. EQIP does not reward land base like this, like CSP does. That's why I always like to tell producers that if you're at that level and you're ready to jump into CSP, this can be well worth it because of this payment. It's rewarding the land that you farm and the current management level that you're at. You're also going to receive a payment that we call EAP2. This is a payment for the resource concerns met at the time of enrollment. So I think there's 8 resource concerns total for New Jersey. This particular person at time of enrollment met 3 resource concerns. This person's going to get $300 per resource concern for a total of $900 per year. Okay. Along with this comes the opportunity to enhance your operation, take it to the next management level. You have to adopt or increase you have to address an additional resource concern at time or at the end of the contract, okay? For this particular scenario, we implemented cover crop to minimize soil compaction. This producer had about 220 acres of land that was heavily compacted. NRCS planner went out, observed this. The producer was not doing cover crop on this land previously. So now he's going to implement cover crop that is going to help mitigate some of the compaction. When we talk about cover crop and compaction, we have to look into species, right? So this particular practice requires species to have fibrous roots or roots that will address compaction, right? In this particular scenario, we carved out that this producer would do annual ryegrass. Ryegrass has fine fibrous roots. They have a very long depth to them as well. So it really helped in mitigating compaction. You can see that these payments are light per acre, right? You're looking at $12.38 an acre. That does not even hardly cover the practice, right? Or the seed, I should say. It's not meant to do that. The resource concern payments and the EAP1 payment is meant to kind of make up for that. So that's what I kind of wanted to discuss there, because there's big differences between EQIP and CSP. And I thought it was beneficial to go through this example. Moving forward, let's see here. Does anybody have any questions? I wanted to open up to questions because I think we could kind of bounce things off each other. I've got Fran and Gail here to answer any kind of program questions you guys have.
Christian, there's a question in the chat. Mm-hmm. Is there any eligibility if we already have full grazing infrastructure in place?
So there would be, yes. Let me run an example right now. Let me go back to that CASF list. Hold on one second. So as I discussed before, if you have, let's say, fencing, waters, and you have a good pasture in place and you want to take it to that next level, CSP would be kind of the driver for that. You can always improve in a practice, right? And we have programs in place to do that. Let me just see. I'm losing that link there. I lost that link. Hold on. What I was going at is a prime example would be stockpiling forages, right? So if right now you're continuously grazing or you're grazing with paddocks or whatever, you want to take it to that next level. There's enhancements for stockpiling forage. There's enhancements of actually tying herd health and body conditioning score to your grazing situation. There's enhancements to introduce legumes into your current pastures. All of that would be under CSP.
Thanks. And another question, can you describe what documentation NRCS will require to monitor CSP contracts?
Okay, so the monitoring CSP contracts, because they're the higher level management, think of it as also a little bit higher level paperwork. Depending on the enhancement or practice, dictates of how much paperwork really is involved. When you start getting into the nutrient management, these higher level nutrient management, you're really relying on consultants or yourself of taking plant tissue samples, soil testing regularly, doing a higher level soil test, such as like a cache soil sample. working with a consultant to, reduce herbicides, reduce pesticides, all of that has to be documented. It really varies on practice. I will tell you that CSP is higher level, so therefore higher management level, higher paperwork level. We do go through the records. I mean, in detail. This is a serious program, and we have a lot of things on our end that we have to meet in order to make these practices eligible and payments eligible. Can this be done on leased land with a written lease of a minimum? I can't read the rest of that. Can you read that to me? A minimum be required. Okay. Yes, it can be done on leased land. All of these practices can be done on leased land for the most part. We like to have a 5-year lease for structural or vegetative practices. Again, every scenario is different, but a lot of our producers have leased land and they are in CSP, and as long as they have control of the land, they have records with FSA and lease agreements, we're fine to enroll that land in CSP.
If anyone would like to unmute and ask questions as well, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, I have a question. This is Dan from Green Cell Farms in Howell and in Plumstead, New Egypt. On the, I know that this extension or this new deadline of March 31st was kind of, I think it was announced maybe a few weeks ago. Is that for payments for 23 or is that for 24?
So we can roll out, depending on the practice, it would be for 2023. So this is a kind of like a fast track initiative. Generally speaking, the enhancements and the hardcore practices, I would never want to overload somebody that just could not get it done from this point to December 31st, right? So someone like the management payments that I was going over, the EAP1 and EAP2 would be for 2023. 2024 would start the hardcore stuff, the actual implementation of practices.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Question in the chat, in terms of soil health, do the levels have to be increased or are there simply benchmarks to be maintained?
For CSP, there would have to be an increase in soil health. So if you're, take perfect example, right? If you're doing single species cover crop, you have to go to multi-species cover crop. With that, I'd also like to see maybe an enhanced crop rotation as well to get, more carbon, essentially more carbon. So with the enhanced soil crop rotation and then the multi-species cover crop, you're going almost 2 levels higher than you were where you were. That's what CSP likes to see, and you're going to get rewarded based on meeting additional resource concerns and additional levels. I just wanted to show real.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
May I speak? Hey, so in terms of the cover crop, so we've been in permanent pasture with about 20 different perennial grasses where we can go with that. I appreciate that you want things to always get better, as we do, but we're not sure what more we can do.
So integrating legumes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which
I mean, maybe, I don't,
yeah.
Do you have legumes in your pasture currently?
Yes.
Okay. Just looking at species diversification. I mean, and looking at the, what your herd health requires, right? Are you lacking something on the component side of your milk? I don't know that. I don't know what your milk tests at or whatever, but you can look at additional species to help mitigate that. You could also look at, you know, some of the higher level grazing management practices. Like I said, stockpiling, that's going to take, I mean, with this kind of a winter that we had, I mean, winter stockpiling would almost be ideal. You know, stockpiling is going to allow you to graze maybe or extend the grazing season. That's kind of the whole idea behind it, right?
Right.
So instead of continuous grazing, you're going to set aside, let's say 20 acres, let it grow up from September to May, and then push them out on that on May, or vice versa. Extend the winter grazing a little bit on a little bit more a grass that has more residual, that has, you know, it is can take a little bit more grazing pressure because it has that vegetative mass, right?
Right.
That's the whole idea behind it.
You're saying to leave standing hay.
Yeah. Leave it standing for X amount of months.
Yep.
And I'm going to go over that really quick. That was actually a really good
Thank you.
example. Yeah, I always like to say, you know, there's always something you can do because of the comprehensive list of practices that we have. You know, there's always something an operation can do to better. So yeah, I'll look at this in detail just so you guys have an idea. Stockpiling cool season forage to improve structure and composition or plant productivity. So you got to think of that as improving soil structure, plant productivity, the whole nine. I always like to say what's above is below, right? So if you have a grass that is healthy, vibrant, can take grazing pressure, can, you know, can take what is thrown at it, then also what's down below is related. So your soils are also improving. Your soil is armored, the whole nine. So yeah, here's a rundown of what a conservation enhancement activity would look like for stockpiling cool season grass forage to improve structure. You guys can look, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, good. So again, like I said before, it's going to record the paddocks that you set aside. It's also going to take into account your existing grazing plan. And it's gonna, like I said, it's taking it a step further. Maintaining specified minimum forage heights to avoid damage to soil or forage, just exactly what I said. Do not allow livestock to access previously grazed stockpiled areas when spring regrowth begins until recommended forage height exists. So with these, and again, these are clickable. So if you have that link, the first link, it's interactive where you can actually click the practice and it brings this up. It also describes the implementation requirements, right? And this gets into a little bit of the paperwork that we require. So it's really helpful to go through these and really know what you want to do. And a planner can help you with this at NRCS, but it's best that you can kind of figure this out for your operation.
Are you ready for another question?
Yeah.
All right. I have two separate farms where I graze animals. Will NRCS treat each farm separate on two CSP contracts or one contract? Especially since Farm 1 has been enrolled in NRCS programs for 20 years. Farm 2 was purchased last year.
It would have to be all of the interesting thing about a CSP, it has to be, and Fran, feel free to chime in too. It would have to be all of your land under your control. So if you report it to FSA, it technically has to be ranked and included in a contract. Whether you do an enhancement on that is kind of up to you. But the resource concerns at both properties have to be looked at, evaluated, and ranked. If you want to do enhancements on both tracks, that is absolutely acceptable. Yes. Did that answer that? The long and the short, or the long of it and short of it is yes, you can.
Yeah, that answered it.
Okay, good. You know, and another tidbit is, you know, it's really interesting to see the amount of money available for conservation practices as a whole right now, between the climate smart commodities grants that were introduced just a couple months ago, to this CSP IRA and CSP or EQIP IRA. I mean, it's incredible the amount of money available to producers. I'm excited to see where this goes. I think we're at a turning point in agriculture where, you know, we've got to think about producing food differently, right? Everybody on this call probably agrees to that. Everybody on this call could also say that introducing soil management, introducing cover crops, diversified crop rotations to their farms has helped tremendously. As we, you know, of course, there's always challenges and learning curves to all of this. You know, and often we feel we might not have the support locally for a lot of this. But just know that New Jersey is certainly dedicated to, you know, rolling this out and helping as best, you know, as best we can. North Jersey RC&D does fantastic job supporting all of this and, you know, kind of pushing the limit too. So any other questions?
Can you add an enhancement mid CSP contract?
No. So once the contract is, let's say, written and signed off on by the producer, we cannot add a contract item for no good reason, right? For EQIP, if let's say, and this is getting into the weeds, let's say we're trying to implement a HUAP barn and we forgot to put gutters in it. Well, gutters are a necessity and a companion practice to that HUAP building and roof and cover. So we would be able to add a practice. For CSP, just willy-nilly adding an enhancement because the producer feels like it halfway through their contract, no.
Are the per acre rates preset on a statewide basis, or is that case by case?
So the per acre rates are national for CSP. Am I correct in that, Fran?
That is correct,
Yeah.
Christian.
Okay.
Yep, very, yeah, and you,
All right.
you know, you're doing a great job, by the way.
All right. Thanks.
I haven't had to unmute.
Yeah, no, that's a good
and
thing, Fran.
interrupt you at all. I'm like,
That's good.
so
Yeah.
if I could just add, but of course I have to add a couple things because you did honestly, you did a great job. So the one thing I really liked at the very beginning of your presentation, when you showed that example of a contract that had that very large acre per, you know, 750 times that very large acre, but you also showed that that cover crop was only on, I think, maybe 50 acres. So that's a good, that was a really good point that you don't have to, as you said, do an enhancement on every single acre. But you're getting rewarded on your total acres because that's the acres that NRCS has assessed. And that's how you get paid on that total acre. So, you know, you can I don't want to say, well, you can pick and choose, right? How many acres you want to implement. So we were talking about the prescribed grazing. So maybe, and I apologize, I don't really know who was describing their prescribed grazing, and it sounds like they do a great job. So maybe if you want to try a small acre of that pasture land to try some type of new enhancement, you don't have to do it on your whole total pasture land acres.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
Thanks, Fran.
but great job
Yeah.
explaining. And you know, you only have 45 minutes. I think we could have probably talked for much longer
Right.
than that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
but great job.
Yeah. Thanks.
And we have about 10 minutes left. Next question is, how many enhancements can be performed on a CSP contract?
I don't know. There is no limit, right?
So
I certainly go ahead.
there's no limit. What we do have a limit on, Christian, is we have a payment limitation limit. So it is somebody with a lot of acres, they could possibly reach that payment limitation. And right now with this farm bill, we're going to be getting a new farm bill, of course. Right now, that's a $200,000 payment limitation. There's none by year, no fiscal year limitation, but a whole contract of $200,000.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the things too, and which kind of fits in with this program as well, is one of the principles of regenerative farming is knowing your operation and knowing what it can do, right? So I like to tell everybody, you know, these are serious contracts where, you know, you don't want to overload yourself and bite off more than you can chew by any means. If you're new to CSP or EQIP, my suggestion would be to dream and think about, you know, what makes the most sense on your farm and what the next direction and the next step would be, and cater those enhancements or practices around that. All right. We all can't just go out and address every single resource concern on our farm and put up HOAPs and roofs and covers, and you know, it's not possible financially either. There are farm bill limitations of $450,000 as well that also limits you to that. So CSP 200,000, EQIP 450,000. So that's my suggestion to everybody. You know, baby steps. Unless you're at that point where, you know, it's a necessity and you know you have the financing and the to back it up, and we can address a whole host of resource concerns at once. I have seen that too. I mean, you know, sometimes it's just inevitable, right? We have to address 10 resource concerns to solve a problem. That involves contracts that are very comprehensive, very detailed. And so, yeah, I would just reiterate that every producer is different. Every farm is different. Anything else?
And just to add to that, Christian, you can re-enroll in CSP every 5 years. That way, as you said, if you want to just, you know, take it a little slower, 5 years later, you know, we can re-enroll. Wait, somebody has a comment.
Especially since you can add. It is. It's a long time to lock into a contract. And I always tell people, you know, this is on rented land. Like you've got to ensure that, you know, it's long term. And you're able to invest money, because these practices and these programs aren't there to make everybody whole, right? There's always going to be out-of-pocket expenses, even with some of these CSP enhancements and whatnot. So it's something to think about. I mean, you really got to be locked in. Sure. It's not for everybody either. I mean, you know, and it depends on the operation. So I just reiterate that a lot. You know, I don't want to, well, again, I guess I should say it, but you can cancel a contract if you lost land control that is completely beyond your control, and it's documented, you can cancel a contract. So that 5-year contract is scary, but there are ways out of it if it was beyond your control. What happens if you don't achieve the benchmarks of the contract? Okay, so yeah, CSP does have these, for lack of a better term, benchmarks. The idea is that you would actually not be entered into the you would not be eligible for the contract to begin with if we could not show on our end that you're meeting a benchmark at the end of the contract. And that benchmark could be in, let's say, just for, let's say, soil health, resource concern. If you're here and you're not here at the end of the contract, you would actually not be eligible for the program. So it's done on the front end, not on the back end. It's not like we're going out there and saying, well, you didn't meet the benchmarks and you got to pay all this money back. No, it's actually on the front end. Now, if you don't do the enhancements, let's say, you get behind, you don't do the practices, you don't do the enhancements, then there are repercussions. There's, possible monetary payback and whatnot. But we don't want to go down that road. Good questions.
Yeah, along with that,
Mhm.
and particularly in areas of erosion mitigation, a number of us, I'm sure a lot of people on this call, have been faced with unusual, sudden, huge rainfalls.
Yeah.
Are those increasingly unusual events taken into account when benchmarks are evaluated?
Anecdotally speaking, yes. We cannot sit there and say that these rain events are normal, right? So as planners, you kind of have to adjust your way of thinking. For CSP though, if you have active ephemeral erosion on your land, technically you have to address that before entering into CSP on cropland. Gully erosion and sheet and rill, not so much. So yes, there are those factors that, and Nina, you bring up a great point. It's like, sometimes no matter what you do on the landscape, you can no-till cover crop, prescribe graze, undergraze. I mean, these storms, let's face it, Ida was intense. And it seems like that's not every 100 years anymore. It's every 10 years. So yeah, it has opened up our eyes as planners and NRCS to be able to evaluate a little bit differently because of that. And it's certainly taken into account. Really good point.
Christian, can I just jump in here a second?
Sure.
In regards to like if you have erosion on your farm, you could still get into CSP. It's just that the CSP practice payment rates for addressing erosion are not the greatest. So you might want to think about an EQIP contract to be addressing that erosion, but you still also could have a CSP contract at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't preclude you
Yes.
from enrolling or anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. I thought this was really good. Again, reach out to your local service center for more information. Sign up deadline March 31st. And then if you want to discuss anything else, I think a lot of you guys have my contact information. If not, you can find it. Thanks for everybody for joining today. I thought this went really well, and I like to see that there's a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We'll be sending out an email with the links we shared, and this has been recorded, so we'll also be putting it up online, and we'll share that with everyone who signed up.
Great.
Great job. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
Excellent job, Mr. Bench.
Thanks, Gail.